to touch on a subject that's going to take a couple of twists and turns here, so stick with me. I've been saying for years, and I'm going to continue to say this because it's 100% true, that Democrats suck at messaging and Republicans are brilliant at messaging. It doesn't matter that Democrats have a better message. It doesn't matter that Democrats are trying to tell you the reality of a situation and Republicans are feeding you a line of bullshit. Republicans are much better at messaging. They are able to convince people that a lie is the reality. What am I talking about? Here's an example. Republicans have been able to convince regular folks who will never be affected by raising the capital gains tax that raising the capital gains tax will negatively affect them. Watch this video and we're going to discuss this.
Kamala is going to raise the long-term capital gains to 44%. You literally have to be in a fucking cult to cheer for that shit. And it's my birthday today, so I'm not going to do a bunch of bullshit. It's just crazy. Like, I don't understand these people, man. I don't understand how you can sit and cheer for all your fucking money being taken from you.
Now, we're going to do a dive into the capital gains tax thing in just a moment. Let me just start by saying her name is Kamala, not Kamala. It's Kamala. And that has been said in thousands, probably millions of videos at this point in time. So one of two things is happening. Either you're too dense to understand how to properly pronounce her name, or you're doing it on purpose in order to try and lessen her. You tell us which one it is. Are you doing it on purpose in order to shit on her name, or are you too dense to understand how to properly pronounce her name? Regardless, let's move on with the capital gains tax. You will never be affected by the capital gains tax. Never. Time for an education. Understanding long-term capital gains tax. Anytime you sell an asset, there are potential tax consequences. Capital assets, including stocks, bonds, real estate, and more, can result in either capital gains or losses when sold. If you sell an asset for more than you bought it, you generally have a capital gain, which could be subject to taxation. You'll pay taxes on the difference between your basis, usually meaning the amount you purchased the asset for, and the price when you sell it. Meanwhile, when you sell an asset for less than you bought it, you have a capital loss, which can help reduce your tax liability. Here's where you got to start paying attention. Capital gains can either be long-term or short-term, depending on how long you hold the asset. Assets held for 1 year or less are subject to short-term capital gains taxes, while assets held for longer than 1 year are subject to long-term capital gain taxes. Long-term capital gains are typically taxed at a lower rate, at lower rates, meaning there may be a benefit to holding onto your assets for longer before you sell them. Short-term capital gains are taxed at the same rate as ordinary income. Meanwhile, long-term capital gains are taxed at 0%, 15%, or 20%. And as you mentioned, Kamala would like to raise that threshold. The rate you pay is based on your taxable income. Just like with ordinary income tax rates, the higher your income, the higher your long-term capital gains tax rates. Here's where I really want you to pay attention, because I'm pretty sure this is what people like him are thinking about. While the standard long-term capital gains tax rates apply for most assets, there are few exceptions. First, and perhaps most relevant for most Americans, is the capital gains tax exemption for selling a home. When you sell a home, you can exclude $250,000 of your gain, or $500,000 for a married couple, if you've owned and lived in the home for at least 2 of the past 5 years. This is the part where most Americans who believe the bullshit that the Republicans push, which is that capital gains tax increases are going to negatively affect them. This is the part where people get confused because they believe that if they sell their house, they're going to have some huge capital gains tax that's going to come down on them. And that's simply not the case. So you saw the exemption for $250,000 for a single person, $500,000 for a married couple. You are married, we're going to take the $500,000. You would have to make $500,000 in profit from the sale of your house. Profit. That doesn't mean we sold the house for $500,000. That means that after you sold the house and you paid off what you owed, you had $500,000 left. That's where you start paying capital. You don't pay capital gains taxes on that first $500,000. $1 after a $500,000 in profit on your house, then you start paying capital gains taxes. I'm just going to guess, and I'm not trying to be facetious when I say this. In looking at your content, I'm going to guess that you're not selling your house for a $500,000 profit. I know I'm not selling my house for no $500,000 profit, not even fucking close. And listen, I'm going to touch on a subject to make a point. This is not speaking negatively about the subject. As a matter of fact, I am very seriously considering donating to your GoFundMe page. This gentleman, unfortunately, his wife is battling cancer, and that is horrendous. I don't give a shit what your politics are. I wouldn't wish that on my worst fucking enemy. And if you guys can, go to his fucking page and donate a couple of bucks. I'm being serious, because nobody should have to deal with that shit. Nobody should have to deal with that shit. But I've watched your content, and I've read your GoFundMe bio, and it clearly talks about the financial troubles that you guys are in, and how you guys are barely making the bills, and you're barely making ends meet. You can barely keep your head above water. You don't have capital assets to tax when you sell it. You don't. And it's not, I'm not being facetious when I say that. We have very little. And our house isn't one of them. So I need to know, who convinced you that all of your money was going to be taken from you if Kamala Harris raises the capital gains tax? Who convinced you of that? Rich people who are going to be affected by an increase in the capital gains tax? Precisely. Rich politicians and their rich donors convinced you that if Kamala Harris and the Democrats raise the capital gains tax, you're going to negatively be affected, when it's not going to cost you a fucking penny. Not one penny. You don't have the capital to sell in order to tax. And you're not going to sell your house for a $500,000 profit. And if you do, if you sell your house for $600,000 in profit, the first $500,000 is not taxed. The 44% rests on the other $100,000. So it doesn't affect you in any way, shape, or form. In any way, shape, or form. But this is what the Republicans do. Rich Republicans convince poor and middle-class working Americans that policies that are going to affect only the rich are going to negatively affect them. Why did you believe that bullshit? Why did you buy into that bullshit when it's not going to affect you in any way, shape, or form? This is what I keep talking about when I talk about messaging and how it sucks. The Democrats' messaging sucks, and the Republicans' messaging is on point, even though it's bullshit.